All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is Coffee Breaks with the Texas Institute for Child and Family Wellbeing. This is a way for our followers to connect with us on Facebook Live to talk with local professionals, leaders, and advocates who are dedicated to. Let's see, I'm gonna read this real quick. There you go. Who are here in the Austin area that are working on child welfare and issues related to foster care. Just a few announcements before we begin. If you're looking to receive CEUs, you had to sign up in advance on our website. If you have already signed up, please comment that you are here in the session right now, or at least once during the session. Once the session is over, we will send you an evaluation via email in the comments in this section. So my name is Timothy Belseth. I work as a research coordinator here. And joining me today is Marcus Coleman. Thanks so much again for joining me, Marcus. We really appreciate you coming in. Marcus has worked for the Amala Foundation as communications, right?
Community liaison.
Okay, yeah. And he's also a former foster youth and was adopted as at an older age. And Marcus, I met him a few months ago. Interesting young man with some really interesting experiences, and he's helped me understand sort of permanency for older youth. The idea that a lot of people have is that some older kids are too old to be adopted. I used to work in CPS, and I used to work with older youth, and it was very common for people to think that older kids are too old to be adopted. And even some kids themselves, as teenagers, thought, "I'm too old to be adopted. It's not an option for me." And so Marcus and I are going to discuss, what it means for teenagers to be adopted. Are they too old to be adopted, and what can be done differently to ensure that we get permanency for older youth in foster care? So Marcus, can you tell me a little bit about yourself when you were a teenager in foster care? Let's go ahead and start talking maybe before the adoption. I'd just like to hear, how many homes were you in, things like that.
Man, I was in so many foster homes, lots. I went from one in Dallas, back to an RTC, then to one in Round Rock. Where I stayed there for like 2 years, and I met a lot of interesting people, you know what I'm saying, some real people, and I got some experience with like for example, there was a kid there that had seizures,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I had never seen a seizure happen before, like right in front of my face. And so neither did anybody else.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I kind of learned how to handle kids with seizures. You know what I'm saying? I'm not sure if that's like a skill that I'm gonna use in the future, but it's like, stuff that is small shit like that you learn along the way.
Sure. So what about the relationships with people you had when you were a teen in foster care? I mean, you 2 years in, it's RTC, right?
Oh, well, this was a foster home.
Oh, foster home, okay. But how were the relationships you had with the people? Did you view the person who was taking care of you as a parent? Did you think of them as a permanent connection?
Not really. It was more of a place for me just to live, because they didn't really go that far to make me feel like family. You know what I'm saying? And part of me made me feel like the people that I was living with was doing it for the money. You know what I'm saying? We ain't like, they had their own kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they had their foster kids.
Did they treat them the same?
No.
So what was the different treatment?
I mean, the foster kids were foster kids. Her real kids were real kids. Like her actual kids, they went to school. You know what I'm saying? They was fresh as hell. They had nice shoes, new shirts. I'm still sitting there showing up to school with raggedy pants with holes in them. I mean, and it's not like they didn't get a voucher from me every month or so. You know what I'm saying? So I can go get me some new clothes so I could look fresh. I mean, every lunch we was eating ramen noodles or a sandwich with some chips and some Kool-Aid while they over there eating pork chops with a size of prime rib and some salad. You know what I'm saying?
So I've this is something that I hear a lot of, especially when I used to work for CPS. I would hear people say, "Oh, my foster parents, they only do this for the money." And what I learned is that it's not so much that foster parents do it for the money, but that kids actually think they're doing it for the money. And the reason they think they're doing it for the money is because, like what you experienced, you see a lot of this different treatment. And having been in foster care myself and having experienced just what you're talking about, where you have, the biological family with the biological kids, having nice clothes, eating different food, they would literally sit at a different table, for example. And the foster kids would sit, at a different table. Yeah, that sends a message to kids that, like, hey, I'm being treated differently because I'm a foster kid. And it starts to mess with the way you not only see yourself, but see the people who are taking care of you, how you view the system. But let's fast forward a little bit. At what age were you when you started to see...
my mom.
Yeah, your mom.
I was still a junior in high school.
And how did you meet her?
She was my VAC teacher.
Your teacher?
She was my VAC teacher, my vocational skills teacher. I actually used to go to her classroom all the time because they didn't like being in all other classrooms.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like an excuse for me to get out of class, just go to her class. And every time I would go in there, it was an interesting conversation to be had. And I didn't feel like I normally felt in care. Us foster kids, we get so used to feeling like nothing because we don't have very much. And when I would go into her classroom, I felt like I was somebody because she would talk to me like I was a regular person. You know what I'm saying? She didn't talk to me like I was garbage.
And what did y'all talk about?
All sorts of stuff. I remember our first conversation was actually about Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and about how I think I told you this about how July was actually named after Julius Caesar, and August, you know what I'm saying, was Julius Augustus, right? Okay. And the reason why February only has like 28 days is because they kept having this argument about which month should have more days in it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So they just took February's days. It was like.
How did those conversations differ from like conversations you had with, foster parents and caregivers and stuff like that?
Because it was like, if you sit, okay, let's put it like this. Let's say Arnold Schwarzenegger just walks into the room, right? It's Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know what I'm saying? Of course you go home and talk to him. It has like all these different stories. I look at myself as Arnold Schwarzenegger. I got all these different stories to tell. But while I was in foster care, there was no possible way I was gonna be able to tell them hoes.
And what was it? What was it about? What were the conversations?
The conversations that me and Gilly would have, I mean, be on some intellectual shit. You know what I'm saying? Because I've always been smart, but like throughout my life, most people have looked at me as like an idiot. You know, and like. When I was talking to her, she made me feel smart. Like I was actually smart. And I didn't want to leave her classroom because as soon as I left the classroom, I go back to being that dumb motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? Excuse my language, but that's how it was for me. And that's what I found when I went to her classroom. And during the time, I was actually getting in contact with my biological family. You know what I'm saying? I was supposed to go back. The plan was for me to go back to Louisiana and live with them. And I went for a visit over spring break, and they just was like, nah. And I went back to her classroom, and I was like, I was destroyed by that, because my biological parents, they was telling me all this stuff about how, we've been looking for you, we missed you, I got my baby back, you know what I'm saying, like, and of course me, I was stoked. I was actually burning all of my bridges, because I ain't give a damn. I'm trying to go live with my real family. I go down there for, just a week, and they're like, nah, we good. You know what I'm saying? He's too much for us.
So your biological family, they initially wanted to get in contact with you. You wanted to get in contact with them and join together. But after visiting them, they decided they didn't want that anymore. And how did your mom, your adoptive mom, how did she step in?
She, without me even knowing, bro, I swear, I didn't even know about this until like 2 days, until like it was like time for me to do like a home visit. As soon as I went in there and told her about that, she went to CPS and got the home study started. So, I I remember I was sitting with the other vac teacher. I was talking about how much my life sucked. I was sitting there. We was at Old Settlers.
Mm-hmm.
You was out there on sale. I was like, man, my life sucks so bad right now, man. I'm just done with it. She's like, you know what? You just wait about 15 hours. I got you.
And she went and
No, this was the other vac teacher. She told me about what Galia had done. You know what I'm saying? And it made me feel like, wow. Because my whole life I've been used to people just disregarding me. And Galia was changed enough by me to want to bring me into her house. And ever since then, ever since I moved into the house with them, they've done everything they could to make sure like I was able to, like, acting, you know what I'm saying, improv, all that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they wanted to see me make it, and I never had anybody in my life that wanted to legit see me make it.
And they did, and that's why it worked.
It worked.
Let's see about taking some questions. We have one that was written down yesterday, I think. No, we don't have it. Okay, well we can just keep talking about some of these things. So there's a lot of things I wanted to pull out. How did you go from being, you know, this person just being your teacher to actually being your mom? What happened? Like, you know, when you went into her home, what did that look like for you? Was it a smooth transition? Was it bumpy?
Come on, dog. You know me. It wasn't no damn
We're talking
transition.
for the audience.
I know. Audience, it was not a smooth transition whatsoever. It was very difficult because it was like this new lady, this white lady, you know, coming into my life, you know, being like, I'm your new mom. You gotta listen to me. And I have authority issues.
Mm-hmm.
So for a minute, it felt like it was just somebody trying to tell me what to do all the time. I wasn't used to that. And for a minute, she was kind of, one of the things that really bothered her was that I didn't call her mom. I always called her Galia.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize how big of a deal that was to her.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've always just, after that visit with my real mom, at the time I looked at mom as something negative because that was a horrible experience out there. You know, like my heart was broke. And like, in my mind, if I would have called Galia mom, you know, it'd be like I'm insulting her.
Oh, I get you. Okay, that's actually really interesting because one of the things that I've realized in working with youth is that part of the opposition to not wanting to be adopted was kids think, oh no, you know, I can't replace my mom, I can't replace my dad. And there's been a lot of work done on permanency to try to frame things different. You know, frame things different. That this person who's adopting you or that you're going to have this permanent connection with, they're not going to try to replace your parents. But I think that idea scares a lot of kids, and it might also scare some parents. So how did you work around that issue about, you know, her wanting to call you mom, you having a different idea of what mom meant? How did y'all work around that?
See, because that's another thing I didn't have growing up in CPS. I didn't have communication skills. And so most of them was essential, you know what I'm saying, especially with dealing with something new like this. And I didn't know how to. So I would have anger outbursts instead of talking about it. And now it's gotten to the point, like it got to the point eventually to where we were able to talk about stuff. And that's another thing, like now that I stress to do with all my homeboys, if we have a problem, I'd much rather talk about it. You know what I'm saying? I got that from them. Them like drilling that, like instead of going off and punching holes in the wall, doing all this craziness, sit down and have a conversation with us. And afterwards, maybe you could fix something.
Yeah. And what would be some of those things that needed to be fixed?
There's so much. There's so much.
What was the biggest thing for you personally?
Okay, so when I first got there, I would watch a lot of TV. You know what I'm saying? Netflix. That was when I very first discovered Netflix. I didn't even know it was a thing.
Yeah.
So, like, I'd be in my room all day on Netflix, and she would want me to go do other things.
Like do family things, right? Yeah.
No, we didn't really have. I was the only child. I was like, you can't be tripping on me. I'm up in my room doing my thing. But no, it was more like she wanted me to be social. You know what I'm saying? She was thinking I was being a nigga. I was like, I'm not. I just don't want to be around people. You know? And eventually that would turn into other things, like when I would get in trouble, she'd end up taking away one of my devices.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Cell phone, computer, things.
Yeah. And that didn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, it just made me, I don't know.
But you were adopted at 17, right?
I was adopted right before I turned 18.
Oh, right before you turned 18.
Yeah.
And you're 19 now?
I'm 20.
You're 20 now.
Yeah.
Okay. But, things have obviously worked, right? You've been with her now for a couple of years. Why does it work? What do you have to do differently, or what did she have to do differently in order to make this relationship last?
Now there's more of an understanding with communication. Like before, we had zero communication skills. It was always a fight. Every conversation we had was going to be an argument.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're actually able to say, okay, if I have a problem, before I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't approach Mom or Gilly and tell her that I have a problem. Now the communication is like, it makes everything easier.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't argue as much. Today we did, but that's because of what's going on right now,
Yeah.
But I mean, that's one thing about my mom that I really like, is that we can communicate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, on about anything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll be talking to her about stuff I shouldn't be talking about my mom too, with my mom. You know what I'm saying? Because that's the kind of relationship we have. It's always good to have somebody that you don't have to have a filter around. And that's the kind of person she is with me. It's like, if I'm having a problem, no matter what kind of problem that is, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I could have just went and clipped somebody's head, you know what I'm saying? Right? And she'll still be there talking to me, you know what I'm saying? Wanting to hear, my point of view, why I did it. And like come up with like a plan.
How does that differ from foster care?
In foster care, they wouldn't. It was like, okay, you messed up. They would, okay, one of the things that one of my old foster parents would do is she would make up different rules. Like, you couldn't get a ride from your homeboy because I used to play football,
Mm-hmm.
right? And of course, she wasn't going to pick me up for football practice. So I was going to have to walk home or I was going to get a ride. And I'm not walking home at nighttime, you feel me? I'm
right
too
after
skinny for that.
practice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I got one of the homeboys to give me a ride.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they wasn't tripping on it. So they drove me home. And I got out the car. And of course, it was this big fucking deal made about me getting to a car without somebody who wasn't like licensed in the system or some shit. And it's just small stuff like that to make me feel like I was less of a human being.
Yeah.
In foster care, like they didn't discipline us like that. You know what I'm saying? The discipline for us was like, I remember for me, we was watching the Super Bowl. It was the Broncos versus the Seahawks.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that?
Yes. 2013 or something like that.
Yeah. And I was going for the Broncos because Peyton Manning, that's that dude right there.
Yeah.
And she doesn't even watch football. I swear she didn't even watch football. And she was going for the opposite team just to piss me off. Right? And so I'm sitting in there, I'm still cheering for my team because I got that team spirit.
Yeah, they got.
And so she gets mad at me for cheering for my team and tells me to go to my room.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like shit like that. Everybody else, or they watch Captain Phillips. You remember that movie?
No, I don't think I saw it.
With Tom Hanks.
Yeah, I saw the trailers. I didn't,
Yeah.
I didn't see the movie.
With the I am the captain now.
Yeah,
that one.
Yeah.
Like they was watching that, and she said that I wasn't invited, so I had to lay in my bed.
And so
those were the type of punishments. It was punishments to make me feel less of a person. It was stuff like that.
And you never really had the opportunity to maybe get your voice heard and ask what can we do differently to make it so that you feel at home here? You
couldn't talk because if you talked about it, you were the bad guy. Like you couldn't come to an even ground. Like now I know, like if you have a conversation with somebody and you're not able to come to an equal ground about that conversation, then there's no point in having that conversation. You feel me?
Yeah. Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about what did your caseworker or CPS do at the time when you were getting close to being adopted? Like, what did they do? Did they talk to you about what the adoption meant? Did they talk to you about anything related to the adoption process, or what did your caseworker, for example, what did they do?
When they started to do adoption, that's when they put me in with Casey.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's when they actually asked me. this question. It was the weirdest question. She's like, "Do you know anybody that might want to adopt you?" I was like, "Nah."
Yeah.
You know, it's like you don't just go around thinking of people who you want to adopt you.
And just for clarity, did you, when you were that age, did you want to be adopted?
Not really. I mean, at that age, I felt like it was more of something for them, like, to keep my mind off of. Like, they didn't. I didn't think they actually knew I was gonna get adopted. They didn't think I was gonna get adopted. I feel like that was just the thing that they do in CPS, is like, they, you know, that they'll give the kid an idea of what's gonna go on. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh yeah, here's what's supposed to happen. You're gonna get adopted. But really, you're not gonna get adopted
Unless you find somebody.
Because look, they did my adoption process with Galia and them. CPS had nothing to do with that. They didn't go and contact Galia and talk to her about adopting me. You know what I'm saying? That was all me. That was all my personality. You know what I'm saying?
In terms of meeting her,
going to her classroom every day, getting her to slowly, you know, like that type of stuff.
But I think that's interesting, because what I've been thinking for a long time about older kids and adoption is that in order for that to work, or in order for it to go well, there has to be some type of connection, right? Like, you're not just going to take a 16 or 17-year-old in foster care who's been through, been in the system for years, been through a number of homes, all those types of things, and then just pair them up with a total stranger and expect that they're going to adopt them and that things are going to go well. You're going to have that kind of personal connection, and you're going to have kids and adults who like each other enough to consider adoption as a possibility. And from what I'm hearing from you, CPS doesn't really do that. And in my experience, for older kids, that really doesn't happen. It happens for younger kids, but not for older ones.
Growing up in CPS was always the ultimate enemy. Like, we always looked at them as the villain.
The kids do, right?
Yeah, like, because they never did anything for us, as far as, like, I mean, I was on my own my whole life. Where was CPS when I was in that RTC for 3 years out in the middle of nowhere? They said I had a caseworker that wasn't even working for CPS anymore. Like, for 2 years, I had a caseworker that wasn't even a caseworker anymore. Like, they went. I felt like personally that they went out of their way to make sure I knew that I wasn't shit.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way. And when I was in the system, I certainly felt I felt that way too. And I think that that's something that I've tried to do in my work with CPS and after CPS is trying to bring youth voice and to the forefront and improve the foster care experience, because you do have a lot of people who they have bad experiences in foster care, and then because of those bad experiences, they start to think of the system differently. Because they think differently, they act differently, and based on the way they act, sometimes things don't go well. Sometimes they get sent to an RTC in the middle of nowhere for years without really seeing their caseworker or having good discussions with them. And you have caseworkers who are so overworked and they burn out, and so the kids kind of get lost in that system. And then we see what happens. We see kids age out. We see them not achieve permanency, and it's really sad. But let's talk a little bit more general about other kids. You've lived with a lot of other foster kids before. What would you say is their attitudes on adoption?
I mean, most of the foster homes I went to, none of the kids really cared about being adopted. I mean, what's it like in jail? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, RTC is most of the kids that I went to foster care with came from RTCs. So they have that prison mindset, that institutionalized mindset, because we was locked. This door was locked. Let's say I'm in this room. This is the living room or the game room. That door's locked. That door's locked. She has the key. You know what I'm saying? Like, I gotta raise my hand to use the bathroom. Shit like that. That's like stuff you have to do in jail. What did I do to deserve that? Right. And those are questions that these kids have in their heads forever. Is what did I do to deserve CPS? You know what I'm saying? Because when you go there, it's more like a punishment than anything. You know, they feed you prison food. You know what I'm saying? I ain't had my first Sprite with no ice until I was like 16. Until I got out of foster care. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's stuff like that. You know, like, they go their whole lives feeling like they're being punished for something, and they don't know why they're being punished.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's scary because, you know, like, that's their mindset. So when they get out, like, I have a homeboy, you know what I'm saying, who lives in Temple. And I remember when we was in the same foster home, he was a completely different person, you know what I'm saying? And now because of what he went through and care, him getting out, he didn't have no clothes, no food, no money, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
He hitchhiked his way to Temple, found somebody out there that gave him a home, and now he's just trapping. Because that's all he can do. That's all he knows how to do. They don't give you them skills. They give you pals when you turn 16, right? And they give you $5 afterwards. So they're pretty much like, all right, if you stay the whole class, we'll give you $5 afterwards.
Yeah.
That's the only reason why anybody stays throughout the whole class. You don't learn shit in there. You know what I'm saying? So like, if you want to take anything out of this whole thing, you know what I'm saying, is CPS needs to make the kids not feel so punished. Like, all the kids that I know, it felt like they did something wrong.
Right.
And they didn't do anything wrong. No kid that's in CPS has done anything wrong. It's just they've been put in a situation. You know what I'm saying?
No, that's good. And go ahead.
But they don't got nobody, bro. We don't got nobody.
But now you do.
Now we do.
You do.
But see, I did all that by myself. See, not a lot of kids out there, they're not cognitive enough, you know, to be able to go out on their own and do that. You know what I'm saying? They don't got them skills.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I still got a messy room because I still don't know, you know, certain things that I'm already supposed to know.
Oh, well, let me tell you, you know, I'm older.
Mm-hmm.
Messy houses are still something that you deal with. You should look at my office. It's a good thing. Good thing we're not filming in there. Let me go ahead and wrap up, and then I'll thank you. But just so we can close, thank you all so much for joining us today. If we haven't gotten to your comments yet, we'll respond later on, and we're happy to do that. We really appreciate your feedback, even if you aren't receiving CEUs. So please fill out the evaluation, which has been linked in the comment section. And if you have signed up for CEUs, the evaluation form will be emailed to you today. You should receive your certificate of attendance within the week. And thanks again for joining. Thank you, Marcus, for joining. Be on the lookout for future coffee breaks with the Texas Institute for Child and Family Wellbeing in the future. And thank you for tuning in. And thanks for joining us.